Hey guys, welcome back to the Paladins Alliance, and welcome all the new subscribers that have come in after the Rescope podcast. I'm Anirudh, Paladin Ajay, and this is the Paladins Alliance. Essentially, we've created a lot of different types of content here, and one of the forefronts that I do monthly is a Patreon discussion. I actually missed a little bit on the timing of a monthly Patreon discussion, so this one is to make up on the lost time so that we can get back on track. Essentially, here you can ask any questions you want. Since we have a low number of patrons, the number of questions that you can ask is also much more than one, and it's only at my lowest tier. It's only $3 a month, and all the proceeds go to making the channel much better, upping the camera quality, making sure that we can have commissioned overlays and such. There's a lot of different things that we can do to the channel to elevate the content, and it comes through Patreon. And so if you guys want to support, there are various amounts of tiers at patreon.com/PaladinAlliance, and you can help support the channel through there. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I was very, very happy with how it turned out. I'm excited to continue doing them. They're going to be around once a month, twice a month. I don't want to beat a dead horse with that type of content. I think that there's a specific niche audience for it, and there's a specific niche concept for it that with the historical context of everything, we want to reserve them for high caliber questions, right? So you'll probably see one after the major, most likely. That's probably the next time that I'd predict for another episode. But without further ado, let's get into the questions right away. So Prussia actually only submitted 2 questions, and with how outdated, quote unquote, these questions may be because of how late I responded to them, I'll try to take a little bit more of a different angle on them. So we'll start with Prussia. Starting with a first question saying, what do you think is a problem with Vitality right now after they failed to qualify from the EPL group? So good thing is that they definitely did not qualify from their EPL group, which they did have a very difficult group to say the least. I believe ENCE made it through, who is now top 5 team according to HLTV, and then you also have FaZe making it through, eventually won the title, and then you have Furia, who are also doing very well for themselves right now. I believe they made the semifinals. Very well done to them, all the people that made it out of EPL Group B. And so for that reason, it makes sense to me that Vitality couldn't make it through, because frankly, they're not at the caliber of team to make it through right now. So I'm actually just checking to make sure. Yeah, Furia made it to the semifinals, losing to FaZe in the semis. So it makes sense that Vitality weren't able to make it through because they lost to playoff contenders, right? And there are a couple of things that I think that are a little bit off base. We did a watch party in a live desk with Thorin, and we talked about why Vitality is off base. And personally, for me, it points to a couple things, right? One being the fact that ZywOo isn't necessarily back to that superstar level form that we were having, where he was going toe to toe with Simple. Now Simple is far and above ZywOo right now, and I think we need him to get back into gear and start showing why he was lauded as one of the best rookies of all time. And if that is to happen, then already the level of firepower increases tenfold for Vitality, which is one thing, right? You have the X factor of dupreeh, but just showing that he's pretty consistent, but beyond that, you don't necessarily have a depth of firepower that you're hoping to have. Masuta is a more supportive element, Apex a little bit more risky, and dupreeh is an X factor for sure, but ZywOo is what this team is built for, and if he can't deliver, then that's a problem. And the other one is obviously cohesion, with the communication aspect of the team. If they aren't able to be on the same page, you can definitely see on that T side of things where things necessarily aren't the chemistry isn't necessarily jumping off the page, and they have some good ideas, but they aren't able to execute it as well because they haven't had enough time. And I think the major is going to be a good litmus test. I did say that about EPL as well. They definitely got a lot of experience to play all 5 matches in their round robin, and we'll see if they definitely scraped through the Swiss system and the Europe RMR. And whether or not they'll actually qualify for the playoffs is yet to be seen. Obviously, stay tuned for the pick'ems. I will be doing a bunch of those videos in the near future, all 3 stages and whatnot. I did get diamond on the last one, as easy as it was, but stay tuned for that. I will do videos on that. But if they are able to get through and make it to the legend stage, that is an impressive in and of itself with the development that they're going through right now, IMO. So cohesion through communication is one thing, and then I'd like to see more from ZywOo. Hopefully that this super team can finally get unlocked, because if we have another contender, you know, these tournaments get wide open. And as we saw at Katowice with G2 and FaZe going toe to toe, we have so many other teams on the horizon. I'd like Vitality to join that conversation as well. So again, we have another one from Prussia. He says, any thoughts on ENCE? I was honestly surprised to see minus Dota plus Madden, since Dota was never an obvious problem, but it seems to have worked pretty well so far. So it's funny because as this move happened, I think maybe a couple of weeks before, I was at ESL Challenger, and I was talking to Devilwalk about Madden, and he was lauding and singing his praises quite a lot. Honestly, all of the players on the former FPX/Godsend squad, he was singing high praises of, and Madden especially for how aggressive he used to play on FPX, and he was hoping that if he was brought onto another team, that he would play as aggressive and they would unlock him just as much. And the identity of ENCE really lends itself to Madden exploring options on this team and showing that he is a very good player. And clearly, I think even beyond just his gameplay, apparently the personalities are gelling very well, and he's slotted in very well with this team, and that's great to see, because I think Dodo definitely had some veteran experience. He was very level-headed, calm, and he would bring in a certain amount of clutch factor to this team, which this team certainly needed sometimes. But with Madden, I think you're now creating a more cohesive roster. You're now making a roster that allows itself to be a little bit more laissez-faire with how Snappy calls. And Snappy has definitely called a hell of a great couple of tournaments so far. And with how they qualified for the RMR, how they did at the at EPL, it makes sense for them to rise up the ranking as they are. They're definitely a well-rounded squad now. You can look towards Diha, and you can look towards Spinks to be those rock anchor players, and then you can look to players like Hades and Madden to, you know, let loose a little bit more and throw some wrenches in the works. And Diha's been getting a little bit more aggressive as well. So I'm really excited to see ENCE. I've been very high on them ever since I did my video on Hades way back when. Actually, last season of EPL is when I talked about ENCE then. And since then, they've all developed tenfold. They've really come into their own, and I'm very excited to see where they can go from here. I don't know if I'd put them as dark horses to win the entire major, because I'd certainly say there's certain rosters that could go toe-to-toe with them a little bit better, but they're on the up and up. They're gaining a lot of experience in playoff situations, and the more experience they get, the more experience their younger players are going to get, just the better they are going to get overall as a team, because the core is very sound, and Snappy is doing one hell of a job to round up those troops. So I'm excited to see what we see from ENCE in the near future. So let's move over to Laser Radical's question. He has a question about Liquid here. Liquid looks like the best team in NA right now, but I don't think their ceiling is high. How high do you think they could rank, and what do they have to do to get to top 5? So I was doing demo reviews for Liquid and watching what is actually going on with them. Why did they qualify so deep in the EPL playoffs, and why did they do so well at the RMR? A lot of it has to do with just them taking a lot of inspiration from European teams, and then also the core of fraggers, NAF, Elige, and OC are doing very well for themselves. OC has definitely transferred his tier 2 skills from old Extra Salt, and he's being able to do very well for himself here in tier 1. So that's great to see that he's transferred very well. It's created a very good structure for a trio of fraggers on Liquid, but obviously the main talking points are whether or not Nitro and Shox are living up to the potential of this organization and this team, right? So Nitro's calling is something that still needs a little bit of work. It's very rudimentary. His fragging itself isn't necessarily very sacrificial. He's basically playing a little bit more middle of the pack. He's one that's joining hands in map control. He's not necessarily taking it himself. So with that amount of with that lack of, well, what do you say, like independence, it's going to limit their amount of map control that they can take on the map over a period of time, and it's something that can get figured out a little bit. I thought it became a little bit more one-dimensional to read where Liquid was going when you would understand where Nitro was playing from and who he was with, and what they were searching for, right? So that's one important thing, and the other thing, obviously, that a lot of people are talking about whether or not Shocks deserves to be on this lineup, whether he's providing enough firepower. I think he's doing a very serviceable job on his anchoring. He could do a little bit better. He's doing a pretty good job in his entrying. That's something that I think he's had to slot into a little bit differently from different European lineups that he's been on. So I think I like that about him, that he is willing to, play very sacrificial. He knows that he is not supposed to be the fragger on this team, and he has to provide a little bit more intangibles to the squad. And I think he's doing a pretty good job of it. I like that he's leading the team a little bit more. He's been clutching pretty well. I think in crunch time situations, Liquid hasn't been crumbling as much as they used to. And obviously, jury's still out, and we haven't had too many high pressure situations for Liquid, and we'll have to see whether or not that'll come back to bite them. Major will be a big test for them, and I'm very excited to see whether they'll mark there. I think they could make top 5. There is a world that they could, but it's very unlikely. There have to be a lot of plans go wrong on other roster situations. I think I've had heard conversations about, maybe Evil Genius, Liquid, and Complexity have done have gone about their roster shuffles in an incorrect way. Maybe they could shuffle a little bit better. Perhaps slotting out Shocks and putting in a more North American talent, maybe someone from Complexity. I'd love to have Fang on this team. I don't think they'd ever let go of Fang, but Fang on Liquid would be absolutely insane. I'd love to see that. Keep Elysian more anchor roles, pull him off of more entry positions, pull Shocks off of entry, obviously, and now have a dedicated entry rifler with Fang, have that aggression, unbridled aggression from him. That could be awesome. I think that could propel them easily at top 5. You'd have an insane core at that point, and even if Nitro's mid-round calling isn't necessarily the best, he's fragging decently. I think it could be enough to propel them to top 5, and that's why 2017's lineup was so good. Way back when they weren't necessarily the most tactically brilliant, but they could get it done with any kind of half buy that you could think of, and that's why their summer was so dominant. So I think that move would be really interesting. I think one thing for sure is that culture has to be solidified, and they have to go all in. I don't necessarily like this half into an international project, half out. I'd much rather. I mean, even Vinny at this point would also make sense because he's been in that NA culture, played against those NA teams. I'm just alluding to the previous roster move, not necessarily one that I want, but Complexity definitely has the keys to the castle, I'd say, and more experience in that sense. They're still youngsters that are trying to learn the game, but they've been to a couple of tier 1 tournaments now, and I'd like to see maybe Fang on Liquid. That'd be really nice to see. But beyond that, maybe highest they could rank, maybe 8, 7. That's at most, but that's with some couple lucky bracket runs and so a couple upsets going in their way, as did the heroic match. But we'll see what's in store for Liquid. I'm excited to see what they have at the major. So we'll continue on. Laser Radical says there's lots of potential within the new guard of tier 1 AWPers. Rank them from worst to best with people like, and he gave a bunch of examples. I'm just going to use that list, and I'm going to go down the row. So we have OC, Farlig, Torzi, Alien, Monacy, Junior, Hades, and Safe. When I think about tier 1 AWPers, I'm talking about how do they play under pressure situations. Are they the hard carry for the team? Are they going to drastically change the identity of a team if they were moved to a different squad? So on the bottom of the list, I'm going to put Junior. I don't think he is a tier 1 AWPer just yet. I think there's a lot of work, there's a lot of potential that he has, but there are a lot of I'd say character traits that he has with the way he plays the game that still need to be ironed out. The way he repeaks is still something that an inexperienced player would show. And he misses a lot of easier shots. He kind of has a little bit of that Draken syndrome, where he's necessarily able to hit the easier shots, but he does very well with getting some flashy ones. So that's why obviously I like OC more than Junior in that respect. Whenever we were comparing AWP players in that sense, I always put OC over Junior for that reason, because he would always hit the easier shots. He would always be the one to be a stable piece of whatever roster he was on board with, rather than be an X factor like Junior. So I put him at the bottom of all these up and coming new guard AWPers. Above that, I put Farley, and not necessarily because I think he's bad, but because I think that the players above him have a lot more impact on their team than the rest. And I think Farley's rifling is better than almost all of the players above him on this list. And I was talking about this with Devilwalk, and he was saying that was the pride that he had on Farley, is how good his rifling was. And I've seen that in spades where they run five-man rifles on Astralis right now, and they're doing very well in that sense. The AWP hasn't had to be that much of a factor. That's where they're doing well on maps like Ancient and Vertigo, where the AWP presence doesn't have to be that apparent, right? And so I like Farley in that sense. He's definitely brought a lot more additional firepower to Astralis, and definitely an upgrade over Lucky. But I think that there's still time for him to find his own identity as an AWPer, and whether or not he will be in that conversation of top 5 AWPers in the world right now, or top 5 new guard AWPers, I think that still remains to be seen. And then above that, I will put Torzi. I think this guy is an absolute revelation. Hats off to Mouse NXT for taking a chance on him after his great performances from Budapest 5. I've loved what I've seen from him thus far. He did absolutely fantastic in Katowice, really put a statement to show that he can play at Tier 1. He obviously did fantastic in the Academy League as well. Torzi has been very, very good, and I think he's going to have to be a mainstay for the Mouse roster, and for, the identity of the team has to surround him, and I think that has to come with time, and people have to understand that with the Mouse management. But he's done very well for himself. He's a very flashy AWPer, but he's a very consistent AWPer as well. He has definitely hard carried a lot more than A-Core has in years prior. So I put Torzi above on this list. He hasn't necessarily hit the upper echelon of AWPers because he does have those good ratings, but the impact necessarily isn't necessarily translating to insane results. They haven't had any playoff appearances thus far. They didn't make the major, and those two big proponents are why I am ranking him lower, because team success obviously is a big thing as well. So I'll move up. We'll talk about Elian. I think he is one that I've talked about previously. I think he has done very well to rise up the ranks in professional Tier 1 opping. He isn't necessarily somebody that jumps off the page for me as of recent. He hasn't shown up in Tier 1 events when the pressure is on. You look at players like Forrester that are actually performing a little bit better than him, and I don't think that should ever be the case for an AWP player, especially with the CIS squads. They're putting Elian in a little bit more aggressive situations, and he isn't able to capitalize. So I'd like to see a little bit more from Elian. Again, he has a potential. We've seen it in Tier 2 play, in ECL and whatnot, in Pinnacle Cups and whatever. He lays ham. That's where his ratings really mainly come from. But then he has this dip in form that I'm still waiting to see from these new god AWPers that they've shown a lot more success in compared to him. So I want to see him rise to that occasion, be considered a star player in that right. But right now it's a little bit more he's a part of a whole in the Entropic equation rather than being the star player of Entropic. And we've yet to see that, and I want to see more from him to really put him up there. Not making the major was also a big thing that why I made this list the way it was. Hades is who I put up above. He doesn't have necessarily as much impact compared to the other players on this list, I'd say, but he's done very, very well for himself to do the job that he needs to do. He's done very good in hitting the shots necessary. His T-rifling isn't necessarily the best, but his opping is increasing in impact as time goes on. I think when I first did a video on him last season, he didn't have as much impact as I was hoping he would have for the T side. He was mainly garnering a lot of my respect off of the CT side that he would have. He was very aggressive. He would hit the necessary shots, as I've said before, but he would also have a little bit more playmaking in him. He'd be more willing to look for that first pick, and so that's why I'd put him a little bit more above all these other players. And now his clutching has gotten up in recent as well. He did a lot of good job in EPL, and for that reason I have to rank him a lot higher as well. And his CT side is still immaculate. He's learning how to play on the T side a little bit better. He's finding a little bit more impact. He's finding a little bit more identity of himself. And for that reason, all those culminate to a 4th place finish on this list on the new guard AWPers so far. He's definitely growing into his own to become a star AWP player. Then above that, I put Safe. He hasn't hit the potential that I want him to, but he has the potential to be absolutely world-class player. And we've seen that showing on the RMR. And I haven't necessarily talked about Fury. I probably won't in this video in particular, but they are an absolute dark horse for the major, I'd say. They've shown that they can do it. Although they weren't able to beat FaZe and they got 2-0'd, the maps were very close and they had an upper hand in a lot of those situations. And I think just a couple more tournaments and they'll be able to, compete with the big boys. And Safe is a big proponent of that. When they were at the RMR, a reason why they looked so damn strong was because Drop and Safe had some of the best tournaments that they've had in a long time. And if those two boys are unlocked, then Fury is going to be an absolute monster. And I think specifically, Safe has to come online. And when he has a good game, he can single-handedly carry Furia through a lot of these affairs. So I'm looking to Safe to be that star AWPer, and he's shown that he can. He's shown in recent that he has what it takes, and that's why I put him above a lot more. And the reason why I don't rank him the highest is haven't seen it realized just yet. I'd like to see it realized, and he's shown flashes of it, and we'll see whether or not he's able to hit that mark. OC, surprisingly, is who I'm putting at number 2 on this list because I think consistency-wise, he is more consistent than any of these players that I listed before. He is always able to hit the easier shots, and now he's getting more confident with how he's playing. He's looking for these first picks a lot more. And the demos that I'm watching, he's very willing to, put himself out there in the first 30 seconds of the round and then fall back, play a very safe amount of safe style once he brings the team the man advantage. And that is very, very safe Counter-Strike. It's smart Counter-Strike. It allows him to learn the game a little bit more, really carve a name for himself in tier one op plays. And so for that reason, I like the trajectory that he's going towards. And I think very easily he can crack the conversation of, is he the best AWP player North America's ever produced? And he's well on that way. Obviously, number 1 on the list is m0NESY. And I will admit, I have to bite my tongue here and say I was wrong about m0NESY. I put him on my report card videos that are on a B- because I saw that how much potential that he had, and I was very worried that he wouldn't rise to that in tier 1, and with the amount of land pressure that he had, the amount that he was bought out for. But this guy is cold-blooded. He was performing so well at Katowice, had an absolutely monstrous performance, and surprisingly did better on stage. I got wetter from watching him, but he did absolutely fantastic in that sense. When the going got tough in playoff situations, he has been performing pretty well for himself in the RMRs. Obviously, they had a tough situation in that sense, but he has the most potential. He has performed the best, I'd say, and I think he can definitely rival, world AWP players if you give him a couple more years, maybe a couple more months even. We have no idea. It's like a ticking time bomb with m0NESY, and we're just waiting to see when the bomb goes off. Is it going to be this major? Is it going to be Rio on the horizon? Is it going to be 2 majors from now, 3 majors from now? We have yet to see, but there's so much potential from him, and that's why I put m0NESY at the top. So a long question answered, but that is going to be that question wrapped up. So this video has been running a little bit long. I'm going to move on over to one last question. Laser Radical had 2, but one of them was about Poison, and he asked, how do you think he'll perform? Long short of it is I don't think that I'm a very big proponent of I'm a Poison enjoyer, but I don't think that this is the right fit for him. I don't think he's found his footing anymore. He's kind of lost his identity, and the Fnatic project is dead on arrival. IMO. Beyond Alex and Mezzi, I think they need to retool and rescrap, and they definitely will. We know that we've heard rumors that there will be a rework on the horizon, and so that is one long short of it. I don't think Poison is going to work, and I don't think he belongs on this team any longer. I think he needs to hit the FPLs a little bit more. I think he needs to find himself a little bit more, find that consistency a little bit more, find the hunger again, start demo watching a lot more, because I know motivation was the issues were cited as some of the issues as to why he was dropped from Complexity. So I want to just see that fire light up under him a little bit more. But the main question I want to answer is, EG bombed out of their group and look awful. What are their issues? Is it calling, firepower, or is it lack of chemistry and missing their coach? Laser Radical, I think all of these points are completely valid. Calling, I don't think Stewie 2K is and should be an IGL ever again. I think the way he plays his game needs to have a little bit of more of an X factor, and I don't think he needs to micromanage other people to do so. I think he needs a dedicated IGL. I'd love to see an MSL. I'd love to, like, if we were going full international, I'd love to see an MSL. I'd love to see an Alex. I'd love to see, any of these IGLs who actually have a little bit more tenure in creating a bit more tactical squads, because the depth of this squad is so lackluster. Beyond maybe the first 3 rounds of play on both sides, it seems like they're scratching their heads on the T side especially. They just waffle around for, the first 90 seconds of the round, and then they execute on the last 20 and see what happens. Things don't go well. That's a huge problem. I think the sheer lack of T sides that they have is just going to painfully bite them in the back. You go to the firepower conversation, Breezy and Cirque are nowhere to be. In this day and age, you cannot have a mediocre AWP player. That is just not something that can ever happen. You need somebody that can be reliable, and you gotta look. And they haven't looked well enough. They're recycling old talent. I don't like that they're doing that. Dig a little deeper. Talk to talent scouts. NA has a lot of teams that are up and coming, a lot of individuals that are up and coming. I've done a video on Minus in particular. There are so many options that you have, and I think you need to take a chance on one of those players and mold them, craft them. You have a world-class coach in Malik. He is 100% going to be the type of player to build a player, an inexperienced player like someone like Minus. So look towards that. So scrap Breezy and Cirque. You can keep Automatic. You can keep Stewie if you want. Make him more of an X Factor player. And I think I don't necessarily know if I want who is it, Breezy, Cirque. I mean, I guess you can keep Rush as well, more of a supportive factor. He's done his job very well. I will say I think he is the best player right now. But lack of chemistry as well. I don't know what it is, but they just don't look like they have any fight in them anymore. It looks like they're kind of just playing for paychecks, and that's fine. But don't play under the organization that makes North America look like a contended region, right? A contending region. They were in that conversation, and now they aren't. Liquid and Complexity are, in my book, the 2 best teams in North America by a long shot, and we don't have EG in that conversation anymore. And I'd like to see the organization take a little bit more liberties in who they're kicking, who they're bringing in, and have a little bit more of identity and plan moving forward for this organization. And yeah, obviously missing their coach is one thing, missing Malik is one thing, but I think as a whole, this Evil Geniuses roster doesn't make any sense to me. It never did make sense to me. And when I said that they had options to get a 5th and they didn't, and they picked up, I believe they picked up Rush instead of Valde, I thought this team was dead on arrival. And people had hype from the old C9 days, but there isn't much to talk about, especially when they didn't have a caller. Called it then, and I'll call it now. I think this team needs more firepower. It needs a dedicated caller, and it needs some fire. It needs some passion. It needs some, wins under their belt, and we'll see what happens from there. Missing the major is a big problem, and we'll see how Evil Genius decide to remedy the huge situation that they have on their hands now. But that's it for this Patreon content video. I did a much longer one because I wanted to dig deep into all these questions. I haven't necessarily done video content in quite some time beyond that podcast video. I'll be doing a pick'em video soon, so look out for that. All 3 stages. I don't know how much analytical content I'm gonna do. If something jumps off the page, if you guys have ideas, let me know. I'll definitely look into that. I'm so happy with the amount of progress the channel has grown. We've eclipsed 2,000 watch hours, and we've nearly hit 750 subs, which is we're getting closer than ever to get to the monetization goals, which, although isn't much at all, it's still a very big achievement, and I have only to owe to you, the fans, and thank you all for your support and going on this journey with me. This year has been absolutely insane. This summer is going to be jam-packed, and I'm excited to get started with all this content, and it's going to start here with the major. So keep your eyes peeled for the Pick'ems video. Stay tuned to my Twitter, twitter.com/datpaladin, where I'm going to be tweeting around the clock for this major cycle. Yeah, and I think if you want to join in on the conversation of this Patreon discussion, you can join me, patreon.com/paladinsalliance. And if that's all for today's video, I will see you in the near future. Keep your eyes peeled for some pick'ems. This is Paladin's Alliance, and I will see you guys later. Peace.